Welcome to the webinar, Secrets to Successful Stock Picking, presented by My Money Sage.
Good evening, everyone. I am Kishore, founder of My Money Sage. Well, let me give me a brief about My Money Sage before we start today's webinar. So My Money Sage is a SEBI registered investment advisor, and we are an online wealth management platform. And we are a community of 50,000 investors as of now, and we have around 10,000 investors who manage assets on our platform to a tune of around 500 crores. When I say that we are a SEBI registered investment advisor, we mean that our advice is comprehensive. At the same time, it is client centric in nature. So what I believe, advice is comprehensive or client centric. Unless if it is comprehensive, it cannot be client centric. That is the reason. If you look at, our advice is agnostic of asset classes or products for that matter. So let me, give you an outlook, and most of you who are participating know what is My Money Sage, and many of you might be using our platform. For the benefit of the users who are first time on this webinar, I just want to share some of the features of our platform so that it can help you benefit manage your investments better. Yeah. So My Money Sage, as we call it, as it is a 3-in-1 app where you can actually not only manage your money, you can also plan your finances. At the same time, you can also invest in what you call assets. So basically you have money management, you have financial planning, you also have investment management in the same app. So when I say money management, you can aggregate all your financial accounts, whether it could be your bank accounts, whether it could be credit card accounts or mutual fund accounts or equities or small savings for that matter, your post office accounts, your EPF, your PPF, your NPS, etc. So I think one of the biggest challenges in case of money management is aggregating or collating everything at the same place. I think we do it for you at the click of a button. The second most important thing is to align everything, whatever you have, in a way so that you can plot whatever assets that you have or whatever liabilities that you have in vis-a-vis your life goals. I think that is what the financial planning part of it, and of course that is also you can do in our app. The third most important thing is about the management of investing, where it could be investing in mutual funds, it could be investing in direct equities, or it could be investing in any of the products. As of now, we have investing in mutual funds live in our platform, and it is direct mutual funds basically. And I just want to share a couple of facts where on our free platform itself, you have various features like say aggregation of assets and liabilities, and you can also track your goals. You can also start investing. You can switch from regular to direct mode. So there are a host of features that is available for you to in our free plan itself. I suggest that if you're not using, kindly use it. Also make use of it, and also if you're really happy, please share with your friends and relatives. And of course, we have a DIY plan which is coming soon, and we also have our premium plan which is live, wherein you have an advisor handholding you, to help you accomplish your financial goals. So I just conclude my about My Money Sage with talking about our performance, how we have performed over the years, and what this is our portfolio. If you look at our mutual fund portfolios, have delivered a CAGR or a CAGR of around annual returns of around 15.4%, and in case of our stock portfolios, the last 5 years annualized return is around 21.4%. So this is what our performance is all about, and so let us start this today's webinar. Yeah. So today's webinar is about secret of successful stock picking, and this is basically where Vinay Paria. Vinay is actually a seasoned fund manager and also CIO of Union Mutual Fund. So he's agreed to share his say what you call insights with respect to stock picking, and I thank him for that. Even before I actually hand over it to him, I would like to share a short anecdote. Yeah. So this incident happened in 1995, Pittsburgh. Okay, it was a bank robbery actually. So it was afternoon, and it was a daylight robbery. A middle-aged man, and it is a middle-aged man actually robbed 2 banks in daylight. Okay, So one thing was unusual. The thing is was, for example, usually what happens is the robbers, they try to disguise themselves, in the sense like say they don't want to like say show their face, or in this case something strange happened actually. Like this guy, what he was doing, no, after robbing the bank, he was actually looking at each and every like CCTV and saying that he was actually staring at the cameras basically. Okay. And the very night the police caught him. Basically his name is Arthur Wheeler. And they caught him, and actually he was surprised. How did you get me, in the sense like the first place? Okay. So because actually he had applied an invisible ink on his face, which is nothing but lemon juice basically. For people who don't know what is lemon juice is also used as an invisible ink. Okay. The problem was, like say for example, when police evaluated further, they didn't, he was not a lunatic, or he was not something like, he was not even on dope, or he was not high on drugs. Basically he was a normal human being, and he was psychologically all right. Okay. So that is when, this incident caught the what you call attention of two psychologists. One is like his name is Kruger. Okay. And basically what happened was, they actually came out with a phenomena that is called as actually like Dunning-Kruger effect. So basically this problem arises when you don't know what you don't know, when you only know a part of it. Okay. So there are so many things that you don't know. It could apply to any domain. It could be like finance, it could be like any domain. If you look at most of the people, they actually overestimate their abilities or capabilities. Okay. There has been various surveys, and like say for example, where people think that they are better than what they are, or they're capable of they have better abilities than what they have. Okay. This is called something as illusion of confidence. I think this is what most investors have. So they think, they can do better than what they are doing. They are able to do, or they think that they are capable to do. The thing is, most of the investors don't know what they don't know. Okay. So this is actually the challenge when it comes to investment management. You don't know what you don't know. So if you look at this, I think, pie chart, what you know is very little, and what you don't know is a substantial portion, and a majority of the portion is what you don't know, you don't know. So in this webinar, or in the series of webinars that we are actually trying to do at My Money Sage, we are actually addressing these two portions, where what you don't know and what you don't know, you don't know. Okay, so this, I will hand over to Vinay. I just give a brief intro of Vinay before I actually hand over to Vinay. Okay, so Vinay Paharia is a chief CIO of Union Mutual Fund Company Private Limited. He's also a CFA and also MMS in finance, with a professional career of more than 16 years. He has worked with AMCs like Invesco, and he has like received many honors and awards, and has been consistently ranked as one of the top 10 fund managers in the last decade. So Vinay manages assets to a tune of around 4,000 crores at Union. So over to Vinay. Vinay, I am stop sharing, you can share.
Thanks, Kishore, and thank you, the entire team of My Money Sage, for inviting me for this webinar. It's my pleasure to talk about our slices of our investment process and the goals of both your website and as is said, educating investors and making them more financially literate, and in addition, make them wealthier along the way.
Yeah.
So what I will do is start sharing my screen to show you and talk about a slice of our investment process, which is fair value approach to investing.
Yeah.
So I'm sure, since you guys are most of your clients and potential clients will be tech savvy, almost everyone would have used Google Maps, right?
Yeah.
This comes straight from the advertisement of which Google uses to bring out the 3 use cases of Google Maps. And these are knowing the required time to destination. When you leave your home, you know what time it will take to reach your required destination approximately. You also are guided towards the shortest route to the destination. All of us are aware there are multiple routes to any destination, and the app gives us the best possible route. And third, and importantly, while you are on your route, if there is traffic or any changes in the time to reach the destination, the app tells you on a real-time basis which is the best changed route which you can take to reach your destination. So it changes your route real time for optimal results. Now, coming back to investment world, what is fair value all about? I'm sure a lot of investors would have heard about P multiple, price to book multiple. Fair value multiple is actually a combination of two things. It is a multiple, like what you have heard about P or price to book, and it is in this multiple is applied to some of the key value drivers. So we call these value drivers as either core book value or core earnings. Why we are using core? That's because there are a lot of accounting related cleansing which we need to do to arrive at what is the relevant value driver. And to this value driver, then we apply this multiple, and we call this as the fair value multiple, which is based on 4 factors. And these factors are returns on equity, growth in this value driver. So if it is earnings, so then it's growth in earnings. Third factor is the risk-free rate of return. And the fourth factor is riskiness of the cash flow. I'm sure most of the people would have heard about the first 2 factors, which is returns on equity and growth in earnings. But from our experience, I can highlight the other 2 are equally important, which is riskiness of cash flows. Like for example, FMCG companies are 1/3 as risky as a construction company, or 1/3 as risky as an aviation company, and as much as risky as a pharma or an IT company. So riskiness of cash flows are important. And fourth factor is this risk-free rate of return. We won't go too much into depth, but these are the 4 factors which drive multiple for any company. So just like human beings have fingerprints, no 2 human beings will have a same fingerprint. Similarly, no, no 2 companies will have a same fair value multiple because of the presence of the 4 factors which are different for different companies. Now, how does this fair value analogy fit in with the Google Maps analogy, which we discussed a few minutes back? Note this. Google Maps tells us what would be the optimal time to destination. Fair value approach tells us approximately what could be my expected returns if I invest in a portfolio of stocks over the next 5 years, 10 years. Google Maps tells us the shortest possible route to the destination. Fair value approach helps us construct portfolios consisting of stocks which can give us optimal returns. And finally, just like Google Maps, which changes route depending on traffic, the fair value approach helps us identify stocks based on changes in the business environment. And the live example of that is the pandemic, right? Because of the pandemic, a lot of businesses which were very attractive, like for example, the multiplex business or the airlines business, suddenly have become far less attractive even on a sustainable basis. So this approach helps us understand what is the fair value changes in the fair value and what is the potential return, and helps us construct optimal portfolios even during turbulent times. So just to give some highlights as to what are the key aspects of this entire approach to investing, or what is the step-by-step approach. So we first compute a fair value for each and every company before investing in that based on our internal research. And then we are aware of what are the expected returns from the current market prices. So upfront, we are aware that broadly this could be the potential return. And then we identify the right mix of securities to reach goal of optimal returns. These fair values need regular updation because business environment is filled with potholes. It's not a smooth ride. So as changes keep happening, we need to keep changing our fair values. The approach brings in a discipline in the portfolio. You cannot just randomly buy and sell based on rumors or any other things. It is a portfolio discipline which is ingrained in fundamentals. The approach helps us identify the right levers to value creation. So for example, in some companies, small changes in returns on equity can produce big changes in fair value. And in some companies, this might lead to virtually negligible changes. For example, if an FMCG company reports an improvement in working capital, it doesn't improve the fair value as much as would, let's say, for example, an IT company, or for example, a metal company. So there are various aspects which are crucial and are drivers of value. This approach helps us identify the right drivers and react to changes in these drivers appropriately. The approach brings both the growth and bargain approaches at par. So there is a lot of discussion in the market about whether growth investing is good or value investing is good. You know, growth investing is equated with investors like Phil Fisher, like T. Rowe Price. Value investing is synonymous with investors like Benjamin Graham, Warren Buffett. So there have been various discussions, debates, and which approach is good and bad to investing. So we have said that these are different routes to ultimately reach the same goal. So just like there are multiple routes to achieve nirvana, to achieve salvation, you can either practice karma yoga, or you can practice jnana yoga or bhakti yoga, right? Similarly, you can practice growth approach or value approach to investing. The ultimate objective is generating optimal returns. And this approach helps us bring both these approaches on the same platform. So now, if you look at this slide, you will look at how a growth company can potentially generate returns. So we have routinely seen a lot of these growth companies getting premium valuations. So imagine a company fair value growing along the blue line, and the red line represents the market price. So you will normally see that growth companies are always available at a premium price to their current fair values. And the reason is because these companies are compounding their underlying fair values at a fast pace, right? So if you are able to buy them at a reasonable price, you will make reasonably good returns. So your returns are represented by the dotted line. If you pay a very high price, your returns will be much lower because you are borrowing some of your returns from the future. So the trick in growth investing is growth at a reasonable price. Now the returns from bargains are very different. We don't call these as value companies, we call them as bargains, because all investing according to us is value investing. So what is bargain investing like? You would notice that the fair value of a company represented by the blue line is growing at a much slower pace compared to the uh, growth companies, right? Now, since the fair values of these such companies are growing at a slower pace, you would notice that such companies are available at a cheaper price. So their prices in the market are visible, are denoted by the red line. They are available at a price which is lower than their current fair value. So the potential future returns, actually represented by the dotted line, is a summation of two things. One is fair value growth plus re-rating. So this is how we invest in bargains. Now, investing in bargains is tricky because you might be very well investing in a value trap. So what is the difference between a classic bargain and a classic value trap? In both these situations, ultimately price and value meet each other. But the hallmark of a bargain is growing intrinsic or fair value, and the hallmark of a value trap is falling fair value. So in bargains, share prices move up to meet the fair value, whereas in value traps, the fair value moves down to meet the stock price. So that is how we distinguish between value traps and bargains. So some of the examples of value traps could be businesses which are prone to disruption, like for example, lubricant businesses. Now you are aware that a lot of trucks use lubricants, right? But over the years, the engines have become more and more efficient. Bharat stage 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So for example, let's say if engine belonging to Bharat stage 1 used just for argument's sake, let's take 100 ml of lubricant, then a Bharat stage 6 engine would use just about 5 or 10 ml of that lubricant. So there is, since the engine quality has kept on improving, the requirement for lubricant oil has kept on falling, and hence the market is shrinking. And that is why the fair value for companies which are operating in this business is falling. And hence, if you are able to invest in such companies even at low P, it can be investing in a value trap. Similarly, companies in the print media space, advertisement is migrating away from print media to internet, and that is the reason most print media companies in India, and not only in India, actually worldwide, are seeing a decline in their business coming in from advertisement, making them prone to disruption and prone to being a value trap. I also highlighted how the fair value approach guides us in real time, and the pandemic was one of such big examples. The onset of pandemic resulted in sharp earning downgrades across the board in all companies. But the important aspect which we were able to spot is that in some companies, the impact is much smaller than what the market was estimating. And in some companies, it was much higher than what the market was estimating, courtesy the 4-factor approach in the fair value. And that helped us understand, for example, sectors like multiplexes, hotels, aviation, were far more worse off than sectors like automobiles, retailing, and capital goods. So this is how the real-time updation helps us guide investments in volatile times. Now coming to something which is much closer to most investors' hearts, I'm sure this is something which they will find of immense value. So all of most investors, most investment advisors allocate capital based on market valuation. And when they look at, and the way they look at market valuation is pretty simple. They look at Nifty P multiple as it is today. Then they look at long-term Nifty P multiple average. It's a 10-year average, 20-year average. And then they try to estimate where this multiple is today versus how it was 10 years back, right? Or 20-year back, or on an average. If the multiple is higher than average, it means market is expensive. If multiple is lower than average, it means market is cheap. We are saying this is a big mistake. And the entire approach helped identify the big fallacy in this entire approach. So what is this all about? First, as we can see, fair values, and we have computed Nifty fair values since FY12. And we've seen that the growth in fair value is directly correlated with the growth in GDP. It seems very commonsensical, right? But still, if you read some of the expert opinion, it is sharply divided. So this helps you understand that GDP is important, economic outlook is important, and that influences your bank balance. So this slide gives you a sneak peek into why you should not look at EPS and why fair value is much more relevant. So from February 28th, we were sitting in, let's say, April 30th, and we were seeing that most of the analysts had cut down their earning estimates for companies for fiscal year 21, fiscal year 22. And the overall cut in Nifty earnings was closer to 28%. The markets had also fallen by about 30-35%. So most of the people thought it was justified. Market is very smart. It is falling in line with the falling earnings. What we said is that, hey, this might be a big illusion. This is not correct. The fair value of Nifty has actually corrected by just 10%. And because of this, we were able to substantially increase our asset allocation. So one of our products does asset allocation. So our asset allocation in equity rose sharply from about 55% in February to 80% in March, April, and it remains at 80% till date. So I will ignore these snap polls and directly highlight. If you look at Nifty's Nifty value and look at what has Nifty tracked over a longer period of time, you will realize where am I coming from. So the green line here is Nifty EPS, the blue line is Nifty, and the red line is Nifty's fair value. As it would be visible, every year Nifty has actually given returns higher than the change in EPS, which would make a casual analyst believe that market has become more and more expensive every year. But what we have seen is that markets were very smart. They have not become expensive. Each and every year, they have very closely tracked the underlying intrinsic values, and that's what they are doing today. So this relationship was perfect till February 2020, post which we saw a very sharp correction in March. So as you can see in this graph, the market corrected very sharply by about 30-35%. But the fair value, as I highlighted in the previous slides, it fell by just 10%. So according to our estimates, the market were significantly cheaper than their underlying fair value, and both these would converge at some point of time, and hence we were fairly optimistic and substantially increased our equity allocations, as I had explained. some of the examples of this fair value in action. So, a lot of people keep asking. In fact, in my own interviews, when I was appearing for interview for a job as a research analyst, my employer asked me, why does this XYZ IT company trade at 30 PE multiple, and why does this steel company trade at 8 multiple? And a freshly minted MBA was supposed to give an answer, which is ridiculous. But anyways, that's history. What we will give you now is something which we have practiced. It's completely practical and completely in fact, it's not theoretical at all. So now look at this. There are these two-wheeler companies. One is a premium two-wheeler company and second is a budget two-wheeler company. The 4 factors which I highlighted, these are based on our internal models, which are forward-looking models and look at how the business will pan out over the next 50 years. So if you look at this data, you will quickly realize the fair P multiple for the premium two-wheeler player actually is about 22 times. And the market is giving it very close 19 times. In fact, as we speak, this has now gone up to 22 times. The budget two-wheeler player, the fair P multiple it should command is 15 times. And the market is giving it about 11 times. This truly becomes much more cheaper. The FMCG companies, now people keep complaining, FMCG companies are very expensive. We should ignore them or we should not invest in them. This slide also gives you a sneak peek how valuations work in action. So we are talking about a large foods company. The fair P multiple for this company is 52 times, whereas the fair P multiple for a cigarette company is about 24 times. And notice here also, the markets are extremely bearish on the cigarette company, and hence it is truly cheap and available at attractive valuation, whereas the large foods company is actually expensive on a price to value basis, not the absolute P multiple basis. Now, if you look at examples from the banking sector, the private sector bank, which is the largest private sector bank, this should command a fair P multiple of 3.5 times or 3.4 times, whereas one of the largest Indian PSU banks should command a multiple of 1.1 times. And here the markets are fairly efficient. Both the companies are getting almost similar price to value. And finally, from the IT space, we were looking at a large Indian internet recruiter and one of the largest Indian IT services company. Here we found that the absolute P which the internet company should get is substantially high, and the market was also giving it that P multiple. So no big scope for re-rating there, but the large Indian IT services company was apparently cheap. So the definition of cheap and expensive is not whether the P multiple is 28 or 67. The definition of cheap and expensive is whether the price to fair value is high or low. So Kishore, these are the broad summary, and I would want the investors, your participants, clients to dwell more on this. It will help a lot of people. So first is, remember, high PE companies may not be expensive and low PE company may not be cheap. You need to understand the nuances, what is driving the cheapness or higher PE multiples. What are the factors to consider while judging a company, whether it's cheap or expensive? First is, it's what is sustainable earnings growth. Second is, what is the riskiness of the business. Third is, you should look at what is the price to value. Questions to ask before making equity allocation. is the market price to value high or low, and not if its P multiple is high or low. We have actually put out a complete white paper on why you should not look at Nifty P multiple to make judgments on market valuations. How it is fundamentally a flawed concept. The fourth point is you need to be very cautious of value traps. You need to see, is the fair value growing? And if it is growing, it is a bargain. And if the fair value is falling, then it is a value trap. Beware of index EPS growth or decline. It does not tell you anything about underlying fair value changes. Like for example, recently we were analyzing internally, a prominent life insurance company has entered Nifty, and a mining company has exited Nifty. So this life insurance company has a reported PE multiple of 100 times, and the mining company has a reported PE multiple of just 8 times. So this just one change makes the Nifty almost 1.5% more expensive on P multiple basis, and it makes earnings go down by 1.5% by just one change. And this is not correct. The price to value equation does not change so much. It hardly budges. Remember, high PE of a stock does not mean it's a high growth business. High PE could also be because it's a higher return on equity business, or it is a low risk business. And remember, on a vice versa basis also, low PE company does not mean it's a low growth business. Most important takeaway, remember, equity is the highest duration asset available in the market. Hence, equity valuations over a medium to long term have a significant inverse relation with the interest rates. So if the interest rates are low, they increase the valuations. And if the interest rates are high, they reduce the valuations. All other things remaining constant. So that was all I wanted to talk about. I will now open the floor for questions. You may ask any questions if you have on the topics I've discussed.
Yeah, thanks, Vinay. I think that was very well articulated. How I think FMA actually can be a better metric to evaluate whether market is expensive or otherwise. So I think, thank you for that. I now open the floor for questions. I also have my co-founder, Sumit, who is actually a CIO at My Money Sage. I am sure he has a list of questions for you. I'll just ask him to first ask the questions, and then I'll actually take the audience questions. Audience, you can actually participate. You can write the questions in the Q&A box so that I can ask Vinay to answer the same. So one of the questions is say, please explain more about the value drivers. So is there anything that you want to share on that, Vinay?
Yeah, so the value drivers which we think are the way to look at it is there are 4 factors which drive multiples for a company. So if let's say a metal company earns 100 rupees and a FMCG company earns 100 rupees, the market will ascribe very different prices to both these companies' earnings. And the reason is driven by 4 factors, of which 3 are unique to individual companies. So what are these 3 value drivers? First one is returns on equity. If you are a company which generates a sustainably high returns on equity over a long period of time, it's a very positive value driver. Second is sustainable earnings growth. So if you have, for example, you are operating in internet retailing, for example. You know that internet retailing in India was less than 10% market, and there are strong trends which enable such companies to grow fast. So you can deploy more and more capital and grow fast over a longer period of time. So sustainable and high growth is second value driver. And third, which you and I or the company's business cannot do, but it is in the nature of the business, and that is the riskiness of cash flow. So for example, if the nature of your industry is high risk, for example, capital goods, construction, airlines, then you will get, for high returns on equity and even for high growth, you will get a lower multiple, and vice versa. So these are the key value drivers which influence fair values according to us.
Okay. Yeah. So as of now, what is your, FMV approach saying? I mean, the markets are like valued, overvalued, undervalued, or like say, where are we heading?
Markets are at a single digit discount to their current fair value.
You mean to say still we are in discount if you approach?
We are in a discount still. Yes.
Okay. So what is any levels where you think, it's going to be fairly valued according to your, metrics that you were talking about?
Yeah, as I said, it is a single digit discount. So if there is a single digit increase in mid-single digit increase in market prices, we would be closer to being fairly valued. But even at that fair value, it is crucial for you and investors to understand that over a 3-year, 5-year period, how is this value growing? This value in equities, and right now I'm just talking about Nifty 50 for simplicity's sake. This value is growing at early double digit. Now, if you invest at price to value of 1 and the fair value keeps compounding at early double digit growth rates, your returns will mimic that. So that is why we are very, very optimistic about equity as an asset class, even from these levels.
Okay. And you said that you have white papers on, like, say, why FMV should not be used instead of a typical PE multiple kind of an approach. So do you also share how is this fair FMV computed, in the sense like how we are arriving at FMV?
Yeah. So fortunately or unfortunately, there is no computer which can generate this.
Okay.
See, because if that happens, we will be out of our jobs. You will replace us. Because see, we should remember that investing is both an art and science. So what computers can tackle is the science part. They can do it very well. But what about the art? And the art will tell me that, for a growth company, trees cannot grow to the sky. Whereas computers will not look at that. It will extrapolate.
Okay.
So yes, it is a combination of qualitative and quantitative approach. It's a healthy combination of both, which helps us arrive at fair values for individual companies. So by the way, there is no single Nifty fair value. We look at individual companies, how is their fair values, and then on a bottom-up basis arrive at Nifty fair value based on index construction. So as you are aware, Nifty is a Laspre index.
Correct.
So based on that index construction methodology, we work backwards and compute this fair value. And that entire distilled number is what I have given you, that we are still at a discount.
Okay. Yeah. So some are asking, like, is there any easy way to find out the intrinsic value or that fair value of that? Everybody's asking, how do we find out that fair value?
The easy way is just investing money through My Money Stage. I am sure you will do a much better job, simply because, see, it's that was on lighter note, but on a much serious note, investing is serious business.
Yeah,
it's your hard-earned money. If there was, just think about it, if there was a straightforward direct approach to calculating fair value, why would there be a buyer and a seller? Who would sell anything at a price lower than fair value? No one. right?
Yeah.
The market exists because from a buyer's perspective, the fair value of things which he is buying is much higher than the price he's paying. And from a seller's perspective, the prices are the fair value is much lower than the price which he's selling at. And that is why there is a market. In real estate, for example, everyone thinks that the price of the house they own is higher. So there is no volume, right? Right. So that is why there is no one size fits all. There is no formula, unfortunately or fortunately, as I said. But there is a method in all of the madness which you see in the stock market. And we have proven that over the last 2 years that if you follow a methodical approach, there is a way of generating reasonably good outcomes in the market.
So what you said was different people have different perspective of fair value. If everybody if everybody's same, fair value is same, probably.
Absolutely. There is no market. Who will do any business, right? At a price which is higher or lower than that. If everyone tells you that this is the price, let's say for the iPhone trades at, let's say, 1 lakh rupees, hypothetically, and everyone knows that this is the price for iPhone, no one will sell their phone below their price, right? And no one is going to buy it at 1,10,000. So that's how it is. That's how the market works.
Also, in your presentation, you spoke about value traps and bargain. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, how do you identify? I mean, how do you differentiate between the two? I think most of the times they look same to the investors.
Correct.
Is there any mantra that you have to identify? I mean, is it a bargain or is it like a trap?
Yeah. So once again, the mantra is a combination of quantitative approach and qualitative approach. Quantitative approaches are the aspects which we just discussed. Look at what could be the long-term growth, what could be the financing required for that growth, and then what should be the worth of that asset. But the qualitative approach is looking at whether the growth or the decline in the business could be higher or lower than what we are estimating. What are the general trends? What is the judgment? Remember, investing, as I said, it's a combination of art and science. There is an aspect of art involved, which is where the judgment comes in. I have to judge whether this is possible or not possible. And when you judge, you arrive at various conclusions, which helps us understand whether the underlying fair value, is it going to grow or is it going to decline? One more simple way of, it's an exclusionary aspect of identifying some of these traps is don't simply buy companies which look cheap when they are leveraged. So most of the value traps lie in companies which are leveraged.
Okay.
So one thing which I would, as a rule, I would recommend investors is don't invest in leveraged companies which appear cheap.
Okay, so basically that debt to equity ratio or kind of like a leverage kind of thing.
Leveraged.
Okay, so I think the one most common question I have is like, is there any shortcut or is there a way? I mean, is there a way like I get this calculation, or is there a way that I actually get this in a go like a fast food? I mean, I'll get it and I'll start investing in it because. So that is the most common question I get it here.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it would be great if we could simplify things, but there is always a limit to simplification. It can't get simpler than that. And I would just say that just think about simplicity in investing. The simplest thing to do in investing is to invest in a mutual fund, right? It's a low cost product. Every cost is variable cost. It is completely transparent. You don't have to sit down, analyze all of the 500 companies day in, day out, and you are not answerable to anyone else. You just look at which approach according to you works best, and then hand over your money, and then keep monitoring it on a regular basis, which I'm sure tools like My Money Sage do keep doing that for investors. So I would absolutely recommend investors that the simplest thing to do is follow the asset allocation advice given by uh, given by their financial advisors, because it is their day job. The day job of any other person who is looking for shortcuts is, let's say he's a computer programmer, or he may be a banker, so on and so forth. So his day job is doing that. His entire energy is focused on that.
True.
Why I would say that it is a full-time professional requirement to do all of these things. There is no shortcut to success.
So one question is like, is intrinsic value same as fair value?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so
they are just different words.
Yeah, but different people have a definition of intrinsic value different, right? What you have as a fair value, what the metrics that you employ to arrive at fair value might be different.
So there is one single way of computing fair value, which is the discounted cash flow approach.
DCF analysis.
We are all practitioners of this art, right? So we have devised ways and methods to help us achieve the overall objective. But the underlying philosophy method is discounted cash flow, which is the same methodology used to arrive which is used to arrive at a valuation for, let's say, a commercial office or a stock market instrument like equity. So yeah, that's how it is.
Okay, so I have one question. Like, say, for example, when you look at fair market value, you also look into, I mean, you said, I mean, a lot of accounting processes are involved. Is it forensic in nature, or like, say, I mean, is that, because if you look at, I mean, most of the data points are available, I mean, whether through what you call a data provider or otherwise. So is this forensic in nature? My question is, I mean, when you talk about like the manual part of it, or when you talk about
yeah, it is. It has to do with accounting standards. It has got to do with forensic analysis. Okay. It has got to do with separating some of the non-recurring, non-business related things which are there in the P&L and balance sheet is concerned. So it's a combination of all of this. The ultimate objective is to look at what is this business ability to generate on every incremental rupee of capital employed. So that is the overarching principle with which all of these adjustments are made.
Okay. Yeah, I think we have taken most of the questions that I think. Okay. So I think thank you, Vinay. I think that was very interesting and also, like, say, also very informative. I think at the bottom line, I would say, like, say, I mean, because this is a full-time thing, I mean, it is not something which you should be, I mean, dabbling in, or like say you should be, I mean, if unless until you do this for bread and butter, so you should not be venturing into direct stocks, and better stick to mutual funds. And probably, like, I mean, since, I mean, as you rightly told, it is a more transparent product, very flexible product. I would say, in fact, my opinion is, like, say, it is one of the I mean, what you call, it is an equalizer. I say, I mean, because I mean, when mutual funds were not there, I mean, not everyone were able to invest in mutual funds. Now, because I think they can invest in small amount fractions also. Of course, I think I do agree with you. And okay, so I just have one more question. Like, say, how much of promoter pledging shares is a red flag?
It's an important red flag. And it's not just promoter pledging. There are a whole host of other things which I'm sure gullible investors would not be aware of. Yeah. And with my experience, especially on the small and mid cap side, I have seen many things which companies promoters do to make sure that their businesses appear far more attractive than they actually are. So there are a lot of things which happen. And I would once again highlight that it needs a trained eye to spot a true diamond. Yeah. And hence, as I said, it's not worth the while for investors to pursue this on a part-time basis. Just think about it. As you rightly said, you can purchase funds in the smallest of small denomination, and pay a fraction of fees on that. So what's the point of engaging in such activity? Think about it as a return on time invested.
Yeah, unless and until you're really passionate about it. And
absolutely. And in that case, anyways, you don't need anyone else.
Yeah, true. Yeah. Okay. So my question, I mean, it's from my side. So how was this concept of fair market value has helped you like accomplish, investment returns? Vis-a-vis a typical approach that if you look, the majority of the market takes a different approach. And I would say, you are one who actually like have been like propagating this idea, have been like following you. That is one of the reasons why I'm talking to you. And I really appreciate, your efforts in the direction. How has it helped you accomplish like alpha? And how is it actually like say helping you keep your what you call investment objective intact in a consistent way?
So see, as I said, this is a slice of our investment process. The investment process, this is a subset of the overall investment process. The overall investment process is much more vast and wider. The idea is that we manage an umbrella of different funds, and the investment process should be such that it is scalable and flexible enough to accommodate different types of strategies: value, growth, large, mid, small, etc. The way this has helped is that it has given us a scientific approach towards investing. So we have added science to the art of investing. Just think about it and invert the question. If not fair value approach, then what? How will you be guided in approaching investments? There is one company which is trading at 50p, one company is trading at 10p. You look at the peer group, look at the average historical returns. It will not give you anything. So I'll give you one more example. And how this influences the P multiple of even an individual company. So when we started, I started my career in let's say 2002, the interest rates at that time were 11%. And in the next 3 to 4 years, this number collapsed to just about 6%. Now, I would just say, think about investing in a bond. Maybe this is slightly more technical, but I'm sure you will appreciate it, and maybe you will help your investors appreciate it over a period of time. If you invest in a bond which has a mod duration of let's say 5 years and interest rate falls by 1%, the bond prices go up by 5%, right? If you invest in a bond with mod duration of 10 years, interest rate falls by 1%, the prices go up by 10%. The coupon doesn't change, only the market prices change. Why? Because the underlying expected rate of returns has fallen.
Correct.
Now, as I said in my presentation, one of the most important lines was, equity is the longest duration asset you can buy. Suppose, for argument's sake, and we have done a lot of calculations on this, so I won't talk about it right now, but suppose equity's duration is 25 years. For every 1% fall in interest rate, for the same earnings, the multiple should go up by 25%, right? Now imagine 2002 to 2006 period. The interest rates fell by roughly 4 to 5%. It means 100% increase in multiples. So when you look at 2007 multiples for the same company, you will say, boss, this is very expensive. Look at where it was 2003. But your answer will not be the same for a bond. That is the crux. Equity is made up of 4 factors, different moving parts. So don't play with fire. And the idea is, but this is manageable.
Okay. Yeah. So I think investors are asking whether we'll be sharing the presentation. Yes, we will be sharing the presentation for everyone's benefit. So if you can actually review, people can look into it. And with that, I would like to wrap up this session. And I think thanks Vinay. I appreciate your time, and it was really helpful. I think definitely, I mean, I actually gained some insight. I'm sure all the people who participated would have actually gained some insights, so that, I mean, it would help them in investing or creating wealth for themselves. Thank you, Vinay, and looking
Thank you.
forward. I'll be in touch.
My pleasure.